Let me tell you something. There's a special kind of silence that fills a house when a man has already left, but his shoes are still by the door. You ever walked past a pair of size 11s and felt your whole chest tighten? That was me, 7 months pregnant. Ankles swollen, back aching, standing in a kitchen that still smelled like the cologne he wore when he told me, "I didn't mean for this to happen." Now, when a grown man says that sentence, you already know something foolish is about to follow. I remember holding the edge of the counter because the baby shifted inside me, almost like she knew. He didn't look at my stomach when he said it. He looked at the floor. There was another woman. And not just another woman. Another life he had already started planning. While I was folding baby clothes. While I was washing bottles. While I was reading those little pregnancy books that tell you what fruit size your baby is that week. 7 months. Do you know what 7 months pregnant looks like? It looks like commitment. It looks like vulnerability. It looks like no turning back. But he turned. And the worst part? He said, "I just want to be happy." Now, let me pause right here. Isn't it interesting how some people discover their happiness right when you're at your most fragile? I wanted to scream. Instead, I asked one question. "When were you going to tell me?" He rubbed his face like he was the tired one. "I didn't want to stress you." Oh, so leaving me with rent, medical bills, and a crib still in the box wasn't stressful? Sometimes if we don't laugh, we'll cry. And I did both that night. But here's what I didn't do. I didn't beg. That surprised him. See, he expected tears. He expected me to collapse. He expected drama. But what he got was quiet. And that quiet followed him out the door. Now, I won't sit here and pretend I was strong immediately. I cried in the shower so the neighbors wouldn't hear. I talked to my belly like she was my therapist. "Baby girl," I'd whisper, "it's just us now." But what I didn't know, what he didn't know, what nobody knew, was that the very thing he thought would break me would build me into someone he wouldn't recognize years later. And oh, he would see. But not yet. First, I had to survive what came next. And let me tell you, the hospital visit at 8 months, that's when reality really hit. Now, let's talk about that hospital visit. Because sometimes life doesn't wait for your heart to finish breaking before it throws something else at you. I was 8 months pregnant when the swelling stopped being normal. My feet looked like bread rolls. My fingers tingled. And I had this pounding headache that wouldn't leave, no matter how much water I drank or how many pillows I stacked behind my back. You ever try to Google symptoms at 2 a.m.? Don't. According to the internet, I had 6 hours to live and 3 rare diseases. But something in my spirit said, go. So I drove myself. 8 months pregnant, steering wheel pressing against my belly, radio off, just me and the sound of my own breathing. When I got to the hospital, the nurse wrapped that blood pressure cuff around my arm, and her eyebrows lifted just a little too high. Now listen, when medical professionals get quiet, that's when you should start praying. "Your pressure is very elevated," she said. Very elevated. That's a polite way of saying, "Ma'am, this is serious." They started moving faster. Another nurse, another machine, words like preeclampsia floating in the air. And I remember thinking, not about myself, I thought about her, my baby girl. Because when you've already been abandoned once, the idea of losing something else feels unbearable. They admitted me overnight for monitoring, and that's when it hit me. He wasn't coming. I didn't call him, but a small part of me wondered if he'd feel something, like a disturbance in the universe. Like maybe his spirit would whisper, "Your child needs you." It didn't. Instead, I watched other husbands bring bags, rub feet, argue with vending machines. One man even snored in a chair beside his wife's bed. And I remember laughing softly to myself. Lord, I would take a snorer right about now. See? Even in heartbreak, humor sneaks in. But that night, staring at the ceiling tiles, I made a decision. If I was going to do this alone, then I was going to do it fully. No halfway strength, no temporary courage, no waiting for rescue. Because sometimes God removes a person not to punish you, but to reveal you. And lying there with wires attached to me, I realized something else. I had been shrinking in that marriage, making myself smaller, quieter, more agreeable. Pregnancy just exposed what was already fragile. By morning, my pressure stabilized. They sent me home on bed rest. Reduce stress, the doctor said. I almost laughed out loud. Reduce stress? Sir, the father of my child is building IKEA furniture for another woman. But I nodded politely, and when I got home, his side of the closet was empty. Completely. No note, no text, no explanation, just space. And sometimes space is louder than words. That was the moment I understood. He wasn't confused. He was gone. And I had exactly 4 weeks before my life changed forever. But what I didn't know, the delivery day would bring something I never expected. And it wouldn't be from him. 4 weeks. That's how long I had between bed rest and motherhood. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever tried to assemble a crib while your ankles look like they belong to somebody else? Because I did. Doctor said bed rest, but the crib wasn't going to build itself. And I'll be honest with you, somewhere between tightening those little screws and sitting down every 5 minutes to catch my breath, something shifted in me. Not anger, not bitterness, resolve. See, there's a difference. Anger burns fast. Resolve burns steady. And steady is what I needed. The day my water broke, it was raining. Of course it was raining. Life has a sense of drama, doesn't it? I was standing in the kitchen again. Same kitchen where he had said, I just want to be happy. And I felt it. That warm, unmistakable rush. I looked down and said out loud, well, I guess it's time. No dramatic scream, no movie moment, just me and a wet floor and a very calm realization that there was no one to call except my sister. Now here's a pattern interrupt for you. Have you ever noticed how movie childbirth moments always show women yelling at the father like, you did this to me? Well, I didn't have that luxury. So when the contraction hit in the car, I just laughed. Lord, I said, if you're going to make me this strong, at least give me a good parking spot. He did. Front row. See, grace shows up in small ways. Labor was long. 17 hours. 17 hours of breathing through pain, gripping hospital rails, and staring at a ceiling that felt too white and too bright. And somewhere around hour 12, doubt tried to creep in. Maybe you weren't enough, that thought whispered. And let me tell you, heartbreak loves to talk during contractions. But then the nurse leaned close and said something I will never forget. You're doing this beautifully. Beautifully. No one had used that word for me in a long time. Not when I cried, not when he left, not when I packed his things into boxes he never came back for. But in that moment, I was powerful. And then she arrived. 7 pounds, 2 ounces, crying loud, strong lungs, full head of hair. When they placed her on my chest, everything else fell away. The empty closet, the other woman, the unanswered questions. Gone. Because suddenly, I understood something he never would. He thought he was leaving me behind, but he was walking away from the greatest blessing of his life. And I made a promise to her right there in that hospital bed. I will never let you feel unwanted. Now, here's where the story takes a turn, because raising her alone wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part came 3 years later, when I saw him again, and he wasn't smiling. 3 years later. Now, let me set the scene for you. It was a Saturday morning, and I was in Target. Because where else do single mothers spend half their paycheck? You go in for wipes and come out with throw pillows you didn't need. Don't judge me. My daughter was sitting in the cart, swinging her little legs, singing something off-key and loud. She had his eyes that used to sting. Now, it didn't, because those eyes looked at me like I hung the moon. We were in the cereal aisle when I heard it. My name. Not Mama, not excuse me, my government name. I froze. Now listen, your body knows a voice before your brain does. My shoulders tightened before I even turned around. And there he was. Same height, same walk, different energy. The first thing I noticed? He looked tired. Not tired like he missed a nap, tired like life had been arguing with him. And beside him stood a woman. Not the one he left me for. This was someone else. Now pause. 3 years. 2 different women. And somehow I was the emotional one back then? Funny how that works. He looked at my daughter first, and I saw it. Recognition. Shock. Regret. All of it flickered across his face in about 5 seconds. She's beautiful, he said. I smiled politely. Thank you. My daughter looked at him with curiosity, not familiarity. She didn't know him. To her, he was just a tall stranger blocking the Lucky Charms. And let me tell you something powerful right here. There is nothing more humbling than being invisible to your own child. He asked if he could talk. Right there, between Frosted Flakes and Raisin Bran. I almost laughed, because 3 years ago, I would have begged for a conversation. Now, I checked my watch. Walk with us, I said calmly. And as we moved down the aisle, he started talking fast. Too fast. He made mistakes. He wasn't ready. It was complicated. You ever notice how regret suddenly makes people fluent? But here's the thing. I wasn't angry anymore. That surprised me. I was steady. The kind of steady you earn through sleepless nights, daycare payments, and learning how to fix a leaking sink by watching YouTube tutorials at midnight. He asked if he could see her sometime, and that's when something inside me tested him. Why? I asked. He blinked. Why? Such a simple word, but it carries weight. He didn't answer right away, and in that pause, I realized something. He wasn't prepared for the woman I had become, but he would be. Oh, he would be, because seeing me in Target that day, that was just the beginning. What happened 6 months later? That's when he truly understood what he walked away from. And it didn't happen in a grocery store. It happened somewhere much more public. 6 months later. Now, if you had told me the next time he'd really see me would be in a banquet hall with chandeliers and a live jazz band, I would have laughed. Because 3 years earlier, I was figuring out how to stretch diapers until payday. Life has a way of turning pages quietly. See, during those 3 years, something else was happening. While he was moving from woman to woman, I was building, not just raising my daughter, building myself. Remember when I told you I had been shrinking in that marriage? Well, motherhood stretched me, and not just physically. I went back to school. Online classes at first, headphones in, baby monitor beside my laptop. Have you ever tried writing a research paper while somebody is teething? That's a spiritual exercise. But I did it. One class at a time, one semester at a time. There were nights I wanted to quit, nights I stared at discussion boards thinking, I am too old for this. And maybe you felt that before. 45, 52, 60. Starting over feels embarrassing. But let me tell you something. Growth doesn't check your birth certificate. It checks your willingness. I earned my certification in healthcare administration. took a position at a small clinic, worked my way up quietly. No big announcements, no social media victory posts, just consistency. And that consistency led to an invitation. Community Leadership Recognition Dinner. I almost didn't go. Single moms don't always feel like we belong in ballrooms. But my daughter, 5 years old now, hair braided with pink beads, looked up at me and said, "Mama, you look like a princess." That sealed it. So there I was, navy blue dress, heels I hadn't worn in years, confidence that had been earned, not borrowed. The room was full. Doctors, business owners, city council members. And then I heard it again. My name. But this time it wasn't from the cereal aisle. It was from a microphone. And our next honoree. Applause filled the room as I walked to the stage. And when I reached the podium, I saw him. Second table from the front. He wasn't dressed for the spotlight. He was dressed like someone who didn't expect to be sitting in the audience. Turns out, the woman he was dating worked for the city council. She had brought him as her guest. Life has timing like that. Our eyes met, and this time, there was no confusion in his face, no ego, just realization. I spoke about resilience, about women who rebuild quietly, about children who deserve stable love. I never mentioned him. I didn't need to, because sometimes the loudest revenge is a life well lived. And when the room stood to applaud, he didn't clap right away. He just stared. But the real moment, it happened after the ceremony, in the hallway, when he stopped me, and his voice cracked. Now let me tell you, there is something about a cracked voice that will either soften you or confirm everything you already knew. He stood there in that hallway, hands in his pockets like a teenager about to confess he dented the car. "I didn't know," he said. "Didn't know what? That I was capable? That I was resilient? That I wasn't going to sit in the ashes of his decision?" I tilted my head slightly. Calm. Measured. "You didn't know what?" I asked. He swallowed. "That you'd become all this." Now let's pause right there. Become all this. As if I wasn't always all this. As if my strength had been downloaded overnight like an app update. No, it had been there. He just benefited from it without appreciating it. And here's the thing about some men. They don't see your value when it's serving them. They see it when it's shining without them. He went on. "I made the biggest mistake of my life." That sentence, oof, it sounds powerful. But you know what makes it hollow? Timing. 3 years ago, that sentence would have shattered me. Tonight, it barely moved the air, because regret feels different when you're no longer waiting for it. He asked if we could start over. Start over. Now listen closely. Starting over is for spilled milk and burnt toast, not for abandonment during pregnancy. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't remind him of hospital nights or unpaid bills. I just asked one simple question. Why now? And he hesitated again, because deep down he knew the answer. It wasn't love, it was visibility. He saw applause, he saw confidence, he saw stability. He didn't see the years of crying in silence, the exhaustion, the fear. He wanted the finished product, but he wasn't there for construction, and construction is where loyalty is proven. I smiled gently. "I forgave you," I said. Now that surprised him. But forgiveness doesn't mean access. Let that sit for a moment. Forgiveness is peace. Access is privilege. Two different things. He nodded slowly, and for the first time that night, he looked small. Not physically, spiritually. Because the woman he left, she would have taken him back in a heartbeat. The woman standing in that hallway, she had boundaries. And boundaries are what transform pain into power. But here's the part I didn't expect. 2 weeks after that banquet, he called. And what he said on that phone, that's when I knew the past was truly finished. 2 weeks later, my phone rang on a Tuesday evening. Now, let me tell you something about Tuesday evenings. They're ordinary. Dinner on the stove, homework on the table, hair to detangle, bills to glance at and pretend you didn't see. Nothing dramatic. And maybe that's why his name lighting up my screen felt so out of place. I stared at it for a full 5 seconds. Have you ever watched your phone ring and felt like your past was knocking? That's what it felt like. I almost let it go to voicemail. But I answered. Hello? His voice was softer this time. Not cracked, not urgent, just unsure. I've been thinking, he started. Now, whenever someone says that, you brace yourself, because thinking doesn't always mean growth. Sometimes it just means nostalgia. He told me he'd ended things with the woman from the banquet, said he'd been reevaluating his life. Funny how clarity shows up when options run out. But I didn't interrupt him. I let him talk. He said he'd like to build a relationship with our daughter, not with me, with her. Now that caught my attention, because motherhood changes the math. It's not about pride anymore. It's about protection. Why? I asked again, and this time his answer was different. I missed her first steps, he said quietly. I missed her first words. I don't want to miss everything. Now that sounded less like ego and more like awakening. But here's what I've learned. Awakening is not the same as accountability, so I asked him something uncomfortable. Are you ready to show up consistently? Even when it's inconvenient? Even when it costs you? Silence. Not defensive silence, processing silence. You see, loving a child isn't about occasional guilt. It's about daily presence. And daily presence is hard, especially when you didn't practice it from the beginning. We agreed to start slowly. Supervised visits, public places, short time frames, because trust, once broken, rebuilds brick by brick. Not with speeches, with patterns. The first time he saw her intentionally, not accidentally in Target, she was shy. She clung to my leg, looked up at me like, "Mama, who is this?" And in that moment, I saw something in his face that was deeper than regret. It was grief. Grief for time he couldn't rewind. Grief for moments that belonged to someone else. And here's a question for you. Isn't it strange how people only value presence after they experience absence? But the real turning point didn't happen that day. It happened months later, when my daughter asked me a question at bedtime, a question that forced me to confront the final piece of this story. And it had nothing to do with him. It had everything to do with me. It was a Thursday night. Bath time done, pajamas on, edges brushed and tied down with her little satin scarf like she had somewhere important to be in the morning. I was sitting on the edge of her bed while she lined up her stuffed animals the way she always did, tallest to smallest. Order mattered to her. Maybe she got that from me. She looked up suddenly and asked, "Mama, why doesn't Daddy live with us?" Now listen, nothing prepares you for that question. Not the books, not the therapy podcasts, not the "I'm strong now" speeches you give yourself in the mirror. Because when your child asks about absence, you have to answer without transferring your wounds. That's the real test. I took a breath. "Daddy made some choices before you were born," I said carefully. "But he loves you." And she nodded like that was enough. Children don't need the whole courtroom transcript. They just need emotional safety. But after she fell asleep, I sat in the hallway longer than usual because her question wasn't really about him. It was about the version of me that survived. Had I healed fully, or had I just functioned well? There's a difference. Functioning looks like success on the outside. Healing feels like peace on the inside. So I asked myself something I hadn't dared to before. If he had never left, would I have ever become this woman? And that question humbled me. Because sometimes the betrayal is the catalyst. Sometimes the abandonment is the interruption that reroutes your entire destiny. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not romanticizing pain. 7 months pregnant and alone was not poetic. It was terrifying, but it forced clarity. It forced independence. It forced me to stop negotiating my worth. And here's the part I want you to lean into. I stopped seeing myself as the woman he left and started seeing myself as the woman who was released. Released from shrinking, released from convincing, released from performing love for someone who wasn't prepared to hold it. That shift, that's freedom. Now, months passed. His visits became more consistent. He showed up to a school recital. He sent birthday gifts on time. He even apologized, not to win me back, but to acknowledge what he did. Growth. Late, but real. And then came the moment that sealed everything. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't public. It wasn't in a ballroom. It happened at my daughter's 8th birthday party. And what he said that afternoon, that was the final chapter. My daughter's 8th birthday party was at a little community park. Nothing extravagant. Fold-out tables, dollar store decorations, cupcakes that leaned slightly to the left because I am not a professional baker. And you know what? It was perfect. Kids were running everywhere. Somebody's uncle had taken over the grill like it was a competitive sport. Music was playing from a Bluetooth speaker that kept disconnecting every 15 minutes. Real life. He showed up early. That alone told me something had shifted. He brought a gift, wrapped neatly, not last-minute gas station paper. And when she saw him, she ran to him. Not cautiously, not confused, comfortably. And that was the real miracle, because consistency had started building familiarity. I watched them from across the park. He helped her fix her bike helmet, wiped frosting off her cheek, listened, really listened, when she explained the rules of a game nobody fully understood. And for the first time, I didn't feel resentment watching them. I felt relief. Because my daughter deserved a father who tried, even if he started late. Now here's the moment. After the cake, after the gifts, after most of the guests had left. The sun was lowering, casting that golden light that makes everything look softer than it really is. He walked over to me. No crowd, no microphone, no dramatic music, just honesty. "I owe you more than an apology," he said. I didn't respond right away. Sometimes silence invites truth. "You didn't break," he continued. "I thought you would. I told myself you would." There it was. Not just regret, admission. He had expected my downfall, expected me to struggle, expected me to call, expected me to need. And when I didn't, it forced him to confront himself. "I see you now," he said quietly, "and I didn't deserve you then." Now listen carefully. When someone says you deserved better, believe them. But here's the part that surprised him. "I know," I replied gently. Not arrogance, clarity. Because confidence isn't loud, it's settled. He nodded, almost smiled, a sad kind of smile. "I'm grateful you let me know her," he said. And that sentence told me everything. He wasn't asking for me anymore. He was accepting his position, not center stage, but present. And sometimes maturity looks like accepting the seat you earned. As he walked back to help clean up, I felt something close fully. Not angrily, not dramatically, just complete. But the real ending of this story, it isn't about him at all. It's about what I want you to understand. And that's what I'm going to leave you with. Let me leave you with this. If you had walked into my kitchen 7 months pregnant, swollen, abandoned, trying to hold myself together while the man I loved packed his things, you probably would have felt sorry for me. And I would have let you. Because at that time, I felt like a woman who had been discarded. But life has a way of rewriting definitions. See, I thought I was being left behind. What I didn't realize was that I was being positioned. Positioned to discover strength I didn't know I had. Positioned to build without compromise. Positioned to raise a daughter who would never confuse abandonment with her worth. And here's a question for you. How many times have you mistaken a release for a rejection? Sit with that. Because sometimes the door that closes on you is protecting you from a future that would have required you to keep shrinking. He didn't leave because I wasn't enough. He left because he wasn't ready to rise to the level of what I already was. There's a difference, and that difference changes everything. Now, let's talk to the woman listening right now. The one who feels like the timing of her heartbreak was cruel. The one who thought, why now? Why when I'm most vulnerable? Maybe you were pregnant. Maybe you were sick. Maybe you were financially dependent. Maybe you were just tired. Pain at vulnerable moments feels personal, but growth often begins at inconvenient times. And I won't lie to you, rebuilding is not glamorous. It looks like crying quietly so your child won't hear. It looks like learning skills you never planned to learn. It looks like sitting in parked cars gathering strength before walking into work. But one day, you'll be standing somewhere unexpected. Maybe not a banquet hall, maybe not a stage, but somewhere solid. And the person who underestimated you will look up and finally see you clearly. And by then, you won't need them to. That's the freedom. Years later, when he saw who I became, it wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving him wrong. It was about proving myself right. Right to trust my resilience. Right to protect my peace. Right to refuse access where loyalty was absent. And today, when I walk past those old size 11 memories in my mind, they don't tighten my chest anymore. They remind me that sometimes the greatest transformation begins with a door closing behind someone who couldn't recognize your value. And if this story touched you, maybe it's because a part of it is yours too. And maybe, just maybe, your years later moment is closer than you think. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. If this story touched your heart, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories about resilience, dignity, and quiet justice. Because some lessons don't come with applause. They come with peace.